today we are planning to talk about some scenarios, some tips on managing your manager, managing some peers, managing stakeholders, and a lot more. So there is a lot of experience amongst the panelists here, both as individual contributors, as managers, as manager of managers. So let's start with maybe a scenario. So the scenario, hypothetical, is someone came to your manager and complained about you. This could be around performance, this could be around goals, this could be about around you not meeting your job expectations. And said individual didn't really have a conversation with you before, and this is the first time you're hearing about this from your manager. What are some concrete steps you should take in this scenario to set expectations with your manager and right your wrong if you were wrong in the first place? Let's start with Louis.
Yeah, so I've actually got a scenario very similar to the exact one you just brought up. A while back, I worked for a startup that was growing very quickly. We had a meeting about budgets, or I forget exactly what the meeting was about, but there were some questions, and I was very busy at the time. You know how it is in a startup. There's lots of things happening. And I think I gave an inadequate answer, basically. And the person went to my manager and said, I was absolutely professional, but I didn't give details around my team, my budget, these different things that were happening, because I was like, I don't have time to pull that stuff up basically right now. And this person went straight to my manager, somebody from finance, not even in engineering. They went to my manager. And my manager sat on it for maybe a day or two, and then approached me while I was busy coding. I had people I was managing at the time. We were all super busy. He said, I know we're really busy, but I've got like a coaching moment that I'd like to take you through. And we went into a room, and he mentioned that somebody came to him and said that I gave like a rude answer, basically, and I refused to pull some numbers. But so leading up to that moment, though, I had very good communication with my manager. We were super in sync about everything that was going on. And the manager, he used that as a moment to basically just be careful with the way you communicate with some of the people that are not in engineering. Be careful with the way that you say certain things, because they could be easily misconstrued and they could hurt you, basically. Little things like that could come back later when you're up for a promotion or whatever it is. And it was basically a super interesting scenario. But it was like a slap in the wrist for me. It wasn't like I was in trouble or anything. It was just, but I think that it's everything that leads up to that. Having trust, having transparency with your manager, those sorts of things lead to situations like this, even difficult situations, being pretty easy to overcome, and having a very transparent conversation with each other about what went wrong. And of course, I took that feedback as something that I have to be very careful next time I speak to somebody on that other side of the company, because they might mistake what I'm saying. They might take it the wrong way, and it could hurt me. I saw Mitra had her hand up. You want to jump in?
Just a quick question before, Mitra jumps in. So in this case, did your manager have your back, and how did they respond to that person from finance, let's say?
So, well, my manager told them, I'm going to handle it. Don't worry about it. I'm going to handle it. And that's it, left it at that. And my manager, when he spoke to me, basically had the best interests at heart. It wasn't like he was trying to be difficult with me or any of that. He said, I know you're working crazy hard. I already know the answer. I already know why you said that. And so you don't need to explain it. I'm just telling you how it went down and what happened. And I'm just telling you why this could hurt you in the future when something like this happened. And it was a very easy conversation, but it was only an easy conversation because of the other things leading up to that. Like I said, good communication with my manager more generally, being always transparent about things that are going on. And yeah, just so hope that answers it here. Mithra, jump in.
And what you said about good communication and transparency is really going to be the key. I feel like we're going to repeat that a lot in this episode, especially. It just, when you're talking, made me immediately think, as a manager, which most people listening are, I'm sure you're like Louis' manager was, but able to really communicate clearly between parties. I also think it's the kind of higher up you go, there's more of an expectation that you don't deliver feedback through a manager. You can someone directly and hopefully be able to communicate and handle that yourself. And it's hard. Not many confrontation in that sense, but I think in your place as a manager, it's important to always encourage people to do that, to not go through you or go through another manager. them structure the feedback or think about how to best communicate it. And this does remind me of one situation. I feel like, unfortunately, a little different from Louis. One situation that was not so great for me, I was expressing to my manager at one point, I'm not feeling super supported in the team, super connected. And he responded with, I've also gotten a lot of negative feedback on you. So it was correlating the two weirdly. And I think the worst part of this actually was I had never heard this feedback before. I hadn't even had an inkling before that there was negative feedback. And so I think you want to be really careful that, one, you're not correlating things unnecessarily. As soon as you get feedback, you communicate it. And maybe on the other side, you're asking your manager consistently feedback. You're asking your peers consistently for feedback, so it doesn't feel like a surprise. And on the other side, you don't necessarily want to spring it on someone that this is their first time hearing feedback, and because you feel negatively, let me tell you why other people are saying negative things. That's not a good look, in my opinion, and doesn't, allow for like good, honest, unemotional conversation. You want this to be really logical almost, and like thinking of yourself as like something to improve on instead of correlating it with feelings.
This is another situation very similar to the one that you two described, where so actually this feedback came to me in the form of a 360 review feedback. That's when you have your peers and everyone, your direct manager and all the people that report to you, they all give you feedback, and it's collected anonymously and presented to you in an aggregated form. That's what a 360 is. So the feedback I got was one piece of feedback there basically said that I walked into meetings and asked questions like people owed me answers. Is feedback. So I'm gonna let you marinate on that for a second and say that I was a principal engineer. I was the only principal engineer in the company, and I often.
It sounds like you were owed answers.
It sounds like I acted like I was owed context and answers. So this is how the feedback came. It came through 360, and the HR person who reviewed this feedback with me was very surprised at this as well. But I didn't want to dismiss it, so I took it to my manager, who HR already shared this with. So she wasn't a stranger to it, and I handed it to her, and I said, I don't know how to respond to this, right? This is anonymous, so I can't I'm not going to issue a general statement to everybody saying, I'm sorry you feel this way or something like that. So she said, okay, why don't you give me a couple days to think about this and then I'll get back to you. So she sat on the feedback for a little bit, and the advice she gave me when we met again was that, okay, so first, if this is the first time you're hearing this via 360 of all places, the person went about this the wrong way, because direct feedback is encouraged, especially when it's not something really bad. They're asking for a change in my behavior. And secondly, she said, this is an outlier, which to me says that perhaps this person is not used to your direct style of communication, which maybe I was taking for granted that everyone else understood. When I walked in there and asked questions, other people understood and had history with me. So it to me did end up ultimately being actionable feedback, in that even if it was a room of mostly people that understood my style of communication, it still to me meant that I should walk in and set the tone, set the context for just the filler language of, I'd like to understand this problem more. Can you tell me about blah, blah, blah? Literally changes this from just you walking in and saying, what is this doing? So in that sense, for me, it actually ended up being quite actionable. I never did find out who this person was because it wasn't a witch hunt. I wasn't going to go look for them. But I just thought this was like the weirdest thing, right? And I think as my manager, I don't know, I feel like I feel like communication like this really ought to be something that you go tell that person directly, unless of course there's plenty of communication, but there's plenty of feedback that you simply are not going to be able to do that with. And I understand that. And maybe, but this is I just felt was like really weird to take something that's fairly benign and give that out in the form of a 360, right? Anyway, That's all I wanted to say. Louis, you have your hand up? And then Thiago?
Yeah, I'm basically, there's a theme emerging here, right? We're basically all saying the same thing. We're all saying you have to take negative feedback very seriously. Don't play with it. It's not a joke. And no matter where it's coming from, right? Even if you don't know, tackle it head on. I think what you did, Vic, was super smart. Basically going and expressing to HR, to your manager, to multiple people, hey, I got this negative feedback. I'm going to try to address this. I have no idea who it's from. Do you think it's true? That is super smart because, the way my manager handled that situation, I think is a sort of a good example for other managers to handle that sort of deliver the feedback to your report. If you get negative, even if you think it's BS, deliver the feedback to your report. And my manager, I could tell it in his gut felt it was BS, but he wasn't going to say that because it was, because he understood that it could hurt me. And so he delivered it to me in a nice way, let me know that, look, I know you're working, I know you're busy, I know what's going on, but this person took it the wrong way and that could hurt you at some point in time. And what was really interesting is every time I had a meeting again with that person from finance, I was super thorough. I went in there with, I said, screw this, right? Like I spent like a half hour before the meeting preparing. I had everything ready. That person within a couple of months went back and told my manager and other people, this guy, Louis, is the most thorough engineering manager we've got. Like he knows the numbers. Like
They became your promoter. They
did.
went from a detractor to promoter. Like we talk about feedback as a gift. It really is a gift, right? Because also for every person that gives you this feedback and you think it's an outlier, there are probably 10 people who aren't saying it. And it takes a lot of effort for someone to give you negative feedback. Sure, we can argue about was this the right avenue, but yeah, responding. Yeah, sorry, continue.
No, look, it definitely wasn't the right avenue, right? I don't think it's good for somebody to go to your manager. And I think we could take that question next, when you should go to somebody's manager. It's like a last resort. It shouldn't be the first thing. I think that person made a mistake, but that's neither here nor there. The main thing is the feedback got to me, and the theme that's emerging is take negative feedback, even if it's BS, tackle it. Do not leave it on the table. And I've seen way too many people like, oh, it's just BS, and so I'm just going to ignore it. Bad move.
Yeah, no, I love everything that we said, and I really like the way that your manager handled that. The way that he said, "Don't worry, I'm going to handle it. Leave with me." And he didn't say more than that to these finance guys. But the one thing we're going to say about 360 feedback, and it is like a really easy opportunity when you have this kind of feedback. It's like a low-hanging fruit of changing some behavior and getting some 10x improvement, right? Because it's usually something very specific. So the example that Vic said, he could just try to fight against it and not change behavior, but it's much easier to just try to do something differently and watch to see if that actually changed perspective, right? So I was actually going to bring in another situation that I had regarding managing sideways. And I don't think I handled that super well, but I think it is a really good situation for us to debug here. So I had this other director that was a peer of mine back in the day, and I was handling like a big project that I had to get engineers from other directors. So we had to staff this thing, and we had to get these super senior engineers to help us with this massive project. And so I got those engineers, and I would do one-on-ones with the engineers, even the ones that were not reporting to me, to try to get a sense of what was going on. And I also had a one-on-one with this peer of mine. And like early in the project, I noticed that one really senior guy that was supposed to be 100% on this project because it was really time sensitive, was actually doing something else for the director. So I asked him, hey, we talk about this guy being 100% on this. Why is he doing this late? And he gave me an answer that, oh, I have this person that's on parental leave, whatever. This person is going to join in a month, but let's do this. He's going to stay like maybe 30% doing this other thing. But whenever this person joins, whenever this person comes back, he's going to be 100%. And then a month went by, and again, I checked with the engineer, and yeah, no, still doing a lot of things, still not hard, like being super hard to focus on this project. So I gave the feedback to my peer, and automatically I had to escalate the situation because it was already the second time that it happened. So I opened like a Slack DM with my peer and my boss, and I said, okay, look, this project is the second time this is happening. And my boss scheduled a meeting with the two of us, and pretty much we went over the allocation, and he pretty much asked my peer, yeah, stop it. This project that you're giving this person to stay like 30% of their time is not that a big of priority. And then from the day on, this peer started to respect me. And actually the engineer was 100% on and was pretty good. But I would love to hear what I did wrong in this situation. And I think because it's a typical answer to that famous question, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a peer of yours. And is a classical example on how to not manage sideways.
So sorry, Diego. So in the end, did you say after that your peers started respecting you or disrespecting you?
Respecting me or taking me serious, basically. But it was more then on that day on, we effectively changed the allocation that was not happening before.
So I think going to the manager should be a last resort, right? So I think you check the boxes of trying to communicate, trying to rationalize, give some examples of why the project is, but clearly they weren't getting it, right? I also think that half allocations rarely work well if you say multiple people have the same individual or the same individual contributor reporting to two managers with different projects. Even if the priority or percentage is set up front, it's very hard for the individual to prioritize because they have two different individuals who will be giving them feedback. They have two individuals with competing priorities that will have say during promotion time or evaluation time, but they have only finite number of hours, right? So that is a difficult situation. And I think this is something else that we can touch on later on how to manage dotted line reports as well after, but I'll let others jump in as well. And a time where we managed conflict well and what we did to resolve it.
Yeah, I mean, this is super difficult, right? If there is one point of contention, it is at this point where you're trying to assemble a SWAT team or a Tiger team, and you're plucking people from the best. I mean, usually you're plucking the best people from other people's teams to just assemble this crew of Avengers, and it's going to be a disaster. Basically, it's going to be cool. You're going to get the thing to the finish line, and the people on it are excited because it's got visibility. It's important, but for the managers on those teams, they're rarely happy about it. And even if they are happy about it in the beginning, once the other work starts to fall behind, or what happens is if you take away the best person on the team, then the rest of the team has to do a lot more, not a little bit more heavy lifting, like a lot more heavy lifting. So everybody's mad in that situation. And I think over time, they get more and more mad. And it's a really difficult thing. I basically had a similar scenario once where somebody went behind my back and just had a conversation with my manager, somebody that reported to my manager as well. And my manager just lost it with this person. It was like a whole other, and by the time I found out, I had no idea. The guy came to apologize to me, and I had no idea what had happened. I was like, I don't know, what are you talking about? And I went to Sol and we talked about this, and basically I got completely shut down, and I realized now I was in the wrong, and I probably should have talked to you first, and we should have figured this out. Always the best thing to do is to try to iron it out with the person. Thiago did twice, and it didn't work. I would get into a room with the person, and I would basically put all the cards on the table and say, hey, the next time you're putting me in a horrible situation, I'm going to have to go to your manager, and I don't want to, but you're making me. I'm going to have no choice now. And I'm just letting you know ahead of time, I don't want no hard feelings between us. This is the second time this happens. If I understand, like, how can we resolve this without going to the escalation? What do we need to do? Just let's figure it out, because once I go there, there's no coming back. We're no longer friends. I know you're not going to be my friend anymore. So let's solve it now. I think it sounds easier than it is to do. But this is like a tough one, Thiago. There's no easy answer. Mithra, jump in.
Yeah, it's so tough. I also think it's interesting because I don't want to equate to like gender stereotypes, but I would approach those kinds of conversations so differently. Probably like personality, like a bunch of different factors, but I think I almost get a little scared to come off aggressive if that makes sense. Something I keep coming back to for myself, if I feel in that offended state, is assuming the best intentions from people as opposed to the worst. And I find myself sometimes automatically going into worst situation, or like, why are they like just trying to spite me or go around me or leave me out? And it's not all about me. They're probably intentionally not trying to do that, but maybe that points to some deeper problems that I'm not visible enough, or I'm not as important in this chain of command as they think I am, or I don't seem as important as I should be, or I'm not maybe like unblocking people enough so they feel like they have to go around me, and like really trying to get to the root of like, why are these kinds of situations happening, or why does it feel like you have to be resolving conversations and situations like this? I feel like I recently did this exercise of like trying to find the common denominator, of course, in my situation, like everyone's situation, it's you, but like, why is it, right? And then able to build like good habits or make some concrete changes on that. And what actually really helped me is I was really open to one of my peers about this. I said, I'm feeling like this is happening a lot, and this is the kind of situations I'm ending up in. This is how I'm feeling about it. Like, my intentions are obviously good in this, but why isn't this happening? And they're able to give me a really good outside perspective of this is maybe what's happening and why. It's probably outside factors. It probably is something about that you can do differently, and let's work together on this. And then we talked about this before. She became my advocate. And I think that's super important to just be so transparent about, I am noticing this and I'm trying to fix this proactively, and they can then support you in that.
This is a really good point, Mitra. And I felt that I could have approached the situation in a million different ways after looking back on that. But at the time it was the best that I could do. And looking back, I think one thing that was really I wish I had done was really trying to understand what was this other project that was so important that this engineer had to work on. And to maybe, instead of go to my boss and say, look, this other director is pulling this engineer on other projects, and this engineer is not able to focus on that important project that's on red, I would have saying, oh, we have those two competing projects, and looks like there's some engineers that are involved in both. If you had to prioritize which one we could delay, or which one we had some wiggle room, that could have been a much easier way to address, to maybe change what is the constraint that's making him to pull this engineer on other project, right? What's going on? But yeah, it's always tough when you have to give that kind of feedback, and when someone doesn't follow on their promises, and when you have a deadline on, and when there's so much things that are outside your control. I think that's the magic of managing peers. Is a partnership, but at some point you might need to give some pushback, and they might not agree with that. So at the end, ideally you solve working with your peer to keep the relationship, but sometimes escalating, I don't think is that bad, especially if you want speed. You need a decision quickly that's going to solve the problem, right? I think the partnership sometimes takes time to get to a situation that's actually going to work for both.
Tiago, what was your relationship with that person after the escalation?
I think it definitely was. He was pissed with me for a couple of months, but then I helped him, and I think we're still really good friends these days. Work in different companies, and I think we're much better off because of that now.
I just wanted to share, recently the SVP at my company got us all t-shirts, which all it says on the front is, I suck at my job. And the intention was to normalize soliciting feedback and saying feedback is a gift. So again, for people that were at the meeting, they get the context, but your parents or your girlfriend or your friends might not get the joke. If you walk around with a t-shirt that says, I suck at my job, they might ask why you have a job in the first place if you suck at it. But agreed, as long as you and your teams are normalizing feedback, whether it's 360, whether it's anonymous, whether it's direct, all of those definitely help in improving, in helping you grow, right? Both personally and professionally. And to Louis' point, never ignore this. And if there is one person brave enough to give you the feedback, there is at least 10 that are thinking about it, but not saying it, even though it's a top of mind. here's another scenario that I just wanted to bring up briefly, and it's happened to all of us at some point, or at least you're familiar with it. So let's say you are working on a team and your peer happens to get promoted to being a manager on the same team. How do you manage your manager, and how does your manager manage you now? Is it awkward because you were buddy with this engineer and now you have direct report status to this person? I know it could be awkward. There are things that you could do to normalize. Maybe we can do a quick roundtable. Vic, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So this hypothetical situation is your buddy who was previously on your level is now your new manager, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. So if you are a good engineer, you have almost nothing to worry about. Let's start with there. If you are doing badly at your job and your buddy knows about it, your buddy is now in the very awkward situation of managing you out, because they cannot be seen to be playing favorites, because that is basically, that puts them on the chopping block, right? So if you know that you're not doing well, right? So you need to get your act under control right away. If you are performing well, I think you need to compartmentalize, because while your friend will still be your friend, they're also your manager, and you need to know that they're not going to take it easy on you if you start slacking off, right? And they're going to, in most situations, you're going to become like their right-hand person who still is able to feed them like information about the health of the team, because to a lot of them, becoming a manager effectively cuts them off from a lot of information they previously had that people on the team like share with their buddy but don't talk to their manager about, like weird shit. I can't believe that other team is like having us do this stuff. There's just like weird water cooler gossip that is not really gossip, right? It's still information, data points, whatever you want to call it, that is now cut off to them, and they're going to rely on you to provide the information to them. And you have to be conscious of the fact that other people know that you're doing that, and you can't be betraying your team as well, right? So you are going to be in this now awkward position of both providing them the right information so they can make the right decisions, but also not having your team feel like you are just like giving up all the gossip. But you have to haul ass. You're going to need to do work, and you're going to have to make sure that you're never on their bad side. It's just awkward. At best case, if you're in a larger company, I would try to get transferred to a different team just to remove yourself from this like awkward situation of your buddy being the manager. What are the think about it, right? You're not going to become this team's manager until your buddy leaves. You're not going to get promoted over them or whatever if they just became the manager. What are you looking to do? And they're always going to have an eye toward, am I playing favorites with this person? You're always going to be under that lens for them, which means that they're always going to be harsher on you than everyone else on the team. They have to be. So I personally, if I found myself in that situation, would try to get transferred to a different team.
I've been in that situation more than once, but I was very fortunate that I happened to be at a company that was growing pretty quickly. One way to look at that is now, like you said, depending on the type of relationship you have with your buddy, you could end up being the rat on the team, which is no good, right? You don't want to be the rat. You could, where you're spilling information basically, and you're going behind, and so that's no good. That's a Bronx term, by the way. But I think the other way to look at this, right, is that if you're friends with this person and now they're in a position of power, it's in your best interest to try to help them as much as possible. And I don't mean with information. You got to step up your game now, because you're growing in the same direction with somebody that you have a relationship with. That's a big deal. And for me, what it meant is that maybe you're not going to be the manager of that team, but maybe you could get a team spun out. Maybe you could lift them to a point. Maybe you could push them to a point where, look, I've been in a situation where I had somebody who was my manager that I didn't really think they deserved to be my manager. They just weren't that good. But that's where we are now. So let's get this resolved. And how are we going to resolve it? Either we're going to push this dude to go to the next level, or we're going to make it obvious that we need another team. and we need to spin it out because they don't have enough responsibility or they have too much responsibility. And I've been in both of those types of situations. I've had my team spun out from another team because basically the person I was reporting to just wasn't capable enough of handling all of that responsibility. And I didn't need to be the one to say that. It became very obvious to everybody involved. And the fact that I was able to maintain that relationship speaks to the fact that you don't need to push somebody under a bus for you to win, right? They still were a winner. They still were managing a big team because everybody was growing. And in another circumstance, I was actually able to push somebody that sort of was pretty happy and complacent. I was like, man, you can't stand still. You got to understand I'm right behind you. Let's go. Let's go. This is, you need to go to the next level so that I can go to the next level. And both of those situations are good for you if you have a relationship, in my view. But that's sort of my take.
Yeah, no, I think this it reminded me of two situations that I had. I was in a startup for a couple of years and we didn't have any, let's say, levels of management. We had basically all like full stack engineers and the CTO. And I was one of the full stack engineers and everybody was a peer of mine. And then at some point I was invited to be the director of engineering, but I was already like on that company for maybe 2.5 years and already knew all the guys and already had some challenge. And at that time, I decided to decline the offer. And because I was already interviewing and I thought it was going to be a really tough situation. But on the other time, I had just joined another company and was only a couple of months. And even though I had peers that became report lines, it was a much easier transition because I didn't had much time there. But that's me. And along with Louis, I think that is to see different kind of situations. And it's going to be awkward. But I would say that people will get it eventually. Some people will never see you as their manager, or even if you were promoted and you're not directly managing them, but they're clearly, let's say, stay in the same level and you are one level up, right? They are going to still treat you as their peer and eventually they're going to understand and they're going to respect you. But it is tough for both sides of the coin. And the best thing you can do is, as Louis said, as the person that's getting a peer be your manager, is to partner up and do the best you can to help yourself and to help them. Because if you keep pushing and doing your work and you feel that manager is not being super effective, you don't actually need to say that's going to become obvious, right? Everybody's going to start to go to you instead of your manager, right? And over time, I think that's just going to be clear and is the market's going to self-correct. Mitra?
I think if you're just really focused on doing a good job as a manager and learning what all that entails, then your team will also see that your priorities are different and where you're focusing your time and energy is different, and you're doing a good job, and they will be totally respectful of that. I know it can be hard, but I think the transparency both ways is also, and one of the biggest things that we've talked about a lot, being good at, that you need to be good at as a manager, is being able to give really honest feedback without bringing in the personal, emotional side of it. I think the best managers actually end up working with their friends and doing it really well.
Thank you for sharing, Mitra. Maybe a topic we can get into was instances where we had to manage difficult problems. And these could be high-level problems, these could be technical problems. One that comes to mind was, for example, having to manage a budget for a team after there is, during the economic downturn, or if the company is not doing well, you are tasked with managing the budget and the number of resources for your teams or your project, knowing that you still have fixed scope, you still have fixed time, but now you have to work with a budget that still has to deliver the project, but you just don't have the funds. And what you had at the start of the year is, let's say, cut in half. That's one problem that needs to be managed and could be challenging. Another one, and I hope it never happens to anyone, is managing your cloud budget, where again, you have to keep all systems up and running, but your cloud budget got cut in half because the company just doesn't have the runway to sustain itself for the next 2 years. And given the current run rate at which you're burning cash, you cannot make it to 2 years. So You still have to keep all systems running. You just have to do it on half the budget. Where do you start doing optimizations, and do you run into premature optimizations in that case? And some other ones around vendors, or if the vendor you're working with is too expensive, you're now tasked with finding a new vendor, rewriting either the whole stack or part of the stack that talks to that vendor, just because the costs are too high, or they got bought out and they redid their contracts where the time that how much they charge your company has suddenly 5x. But you have all this legacy code that has hard coded values talking to this vendor that you have to redo now because of cost reasons. So just share any insights that you had or difficult instances that you folks have had to work through. Tiago, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So I would say about headcounts, right? If you were supposed to be given, let's say, maybe 8 new positions for so and so project, right? And then all of a sudden you have that to be cut by half, or you get none. Usually the best thing that I think one can do, or at least in my experience, is to basically look at the current allocation, redistribute the people that you have in maybe smaller change, different like setups, right? I think usually you find more if you just look at what you have holistically, at least headcount wise. And it's not about making people working multiple projects at the same time. That never works for engineering, right? Never works. And for budgets, I feel that the thing that you can do if you have a surprise, your budget gets cut, is to look at all the other budgets, right? Not only the engineering, but combine everything that you have and try to maybe rebalance things. Or if that doesn't work, go one level up on the other budgets and see if you can reallocate something else to get to what you need. You would be surprised at the times that you are able to find the budget that you need just by reallocating or doing some reforecasting on the budget was allocated. I felt that has saved me more times than I can count, just by reforecasting things and seeing the areas that are under budget and reallocating. That's usually really powerful. But I think that's all I would say on this. And AWS budget, I think you can negotiate with them, or AWS or cloud. There's usually a lot of wiggle room. If you are in a really tough position, they have discounts, they have depending on, and same with vendors, right? You would be surprised if you like try to push back a few times and try to reduce some of the contract. I think you can save a lot of money on that, but it's going to require a lot of time and a lot of hand holding too, because a migration to change vendors is just going to be a nightmare for everyone, and your vendor doesn't want that. So maybe the other thing is, instead of doing an annual contract extension, do only till you get to the next rebudget. That could work too. Louis.
Yeah, these things are especially problematic, I would say, in a big company. So I would say, depending on where you are in the hierarchy, make sure that you have really good relationships with people 1 or 2 levels above you pertaining to like headcount budgets. Because I think what can happen is, if you're in a desperate need and headcount's been rolled back, and I think Tiago touched on this reallocation a little bit, one thing I was able to do very successfully was take people that left and reassign that backfill to a team that was desperate. And with the promise that you're going to get your backfill, okay? The moment that we get the fresh headcount, the fresh budget, I'm going to give you what I owe you. So for now, let's just work this out, because we have a team that's desperate, the team that's underwater. If you're not at that level where you can make those decisions yourself, having really good relationships at that level is super, super important, because backfills are a pretty good place to steal from. A lot of companies, in fact, use backfills in multiple ways. Sometimes they use it as a soft layoff, like if somebody leaves, they're just not going to backfill the spot instead of doing layoffs. And so you need to just make sure that you're doing you have an understanding of how your organization works and what the people above you are thinking in terms of that. But I think people leaving is a pretty good place to start if the headcount budgets are tight. Then in terms of actually making the case, though, for fresh headcount, I would say your business is your best friend in that kind of situation. Like you got to hold hands with them, You got to become really good friends with them, and you got to get the numbers that they're going to be able to hit if you can deliver certain projects. And you have to be really tight around scoping those things and saying exactly what you need in order to make those things happen. And I think having those people in engineering respect business numbers, especially the higher up they are, the more they have to respect them, because their fate is tied to the company. Their fate is tied to the company doing well. And the higher up they are, I think they're going to have to basically honor them. So you should basically never ask for headcount if you don't have solid business numbers to back you up in that sort of situation. You can't just say, oh, we're behind because of tech debt and this and that. Yeah, that's nice, but no one cares about that. I'm telling you, like, people up top. But if you go there and you say, look, I've been talking to the business, we have some tech debt, but if we are able to deliver these features for them, the tech debt is your problem, okay? So what that means is you got to cover that with your team, right? But you have a lot to say because you can't deliver these additional things because the tech debt's holding you back. You're not going to not deliver your tech debt. You have to do that. It's always when you ask for fresh headcount, it can't be allocated against something that doesn't generate additional revenue. You got to tie those things together. Really, if you weave them well, you're likely to get your headcount. And I think certain projects that are underwater, again, reallocating the people that leave is really important. But I think there's, again, when it comes to that kind of stuff, we had to go basically to our business partners, explain what happened. We had a team that blew the budget. And how are we going to handle that, and what's going to happen? And here's what's going to happen. If you can't help us, if you can't drop your marketing budget a little bit, if you can't throw us some dollars, the system is literally not going to stop running at some point because we don't have enough budget for this thing. And so you're going to be negotiating, sadly, if your cloud budget is getting blown out, you're going to be negotiating with your business partners a little bit too, because again, they're the ones that, I mean, they need their system to be up. And you want them making noise. You want them going up to their management. You want that management to talk to people 2 or 3 levels above you, and you want them bumping heads. Those are really good sort of ways to kind of get out of the cloud budget situation. But obviously, you need to try to be as efficient as you possibly can. If people are going to come back to you and say they're asking for cloud budget, but they're just burning it on resources that aren't really being used, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I just want to say that I wouldn't. So first of all, just hiring willy-nilly without a business case for it was a zero interest rate phenomenon, right? We're not gonna see that anymore. Every single hire, you're gonna have to submit a whole document explaining why you need that person. But I wouldn't go and say that we have tech debt that we need to fix, right? Director levels and don't like to hear that because they're like, why did you create tech debt? Why did you make tech debt in the first place? You made this problem, you should be fixing it for free, right? It's more of a, we need to refactor in order to hit these new priorities. These new functionality you're asking for requires us to rebuild parts of our system that were built with different assumptions in mind. It sounds like that's practiced. It's because it is. So that's that approach I would take there.
Just one comment, then Vic might remind us. I would say is I agree with Louis. Like, you need to be able to put numbers and to justify the business case for new headcount. With the exception if you are being asked to do some pet project for some like C-level, right? Oh, there is this pet project that they believe is gonna bring so and so revenue. There is potential, but it's a project that's being under the books for 5 years. That might be the only case you might be able to get.
I am past that. I like a bunch of my engineers worked on a CEO's pet project, and when that pet project got canceled, that entire team got laid off. Because even if you're working on the CEO's pet project, you're not immune to it being a crappy garbage project.
Yeah.
Right? And
you might be able to get new headcounts, but you have to be really quick to make that case happen or not, right, or to move on. Yeah.
And I do think like you have to push back against that too, right? Like that's very nice that you think that this is a very important project, but even if you're the CEO, you have to demonstrate that this has some value, right?
I was going to say interest rates might have, Thiago's point, interest rates might have changed, right? But old habits die hard. People will still be piling on things they shouldn't be doing.
And I think we all forget, like when I say we all, I don't anymore. I write this down, but we all often forget that to take on that CEO's pet project, this is a stack, right? This is a stack like a C programming language algorithm stack. It has 5 slots in it. Okay. This is not an infinite to-do list. What is falling off? What are you popping and pushing off this list if you want your shit to be done? Is like a question we really ought to be asking every time. This is my Kanban board of what my team can accomplish. And this column is full. Yeah, new headcounts are what are going to add more slots. Mithra, go ahead.
People also always forget new headcount doesn't mean like engineers ready to go, like onboarding, hiring. I don't understand how people are always like, let's just hire more people. And we just forget about the at least like 30 to 60 day ramp up time that we'll need. But that's a little besides the point. I see this happen also within orgs, like CEO pet projects is one thing. If you're in a bigger company, maybe you have the head of the org or your head of product or your head of engineering. I really want us to get like a tiger team and go like after this. And we see that a lot. I think it can be done well, but I think where it really falls off is if a tiger team is always your answer to something, then your teams aren't structured, first of all, because we're not able to actually build anything within our teams, apparently. And we are really bad at planning. And if that's the case, let's just not do planning or not do OKRs, because obviously we don't follow them. And third of all, why do we constantly have immediate burning priorities to address? That means we're not thinking strategically the goal and the responsibility of these company or whatever it is. So I think one pushback I always like to have is, of course, I don't have infinite to-do lists like Vic said. Are we dropping, but also what is going to happen after this? Are we just building this thing and pushing it out and then what does this look like in the long run? How does this fit into our strategy? And kind of bringing that back, because I feel like everyone gets carried with, we need to solve this burning issue right now, exactly how we do it, and we lose sight of the long term.
Honest question, how do you push back on the CEO or CTO pet project? How do you do that when you are like 2, 3, 4, 5 levels down and you see that project getting started is gonna burn?
I feel like you ask those questions. First of all, are we okay with not doing, like Vic said, like the XYZ project? Do we actually have confidence that this is going to move the metrics we think it is? Do we know that this is the right thing for the problem we think we're solving? How does this fit strategy? Who's going to own this product after we ship it? It shows two things, like push, but in a way that you're showing that you're thinking about it and you can act invested by just like planning for it, basically.
Warren Buffett actually I've been reading a lot of Warren Buffett lately, and he talks a lot about this. This is you should be reading Warren Buffett if you want to navigate the non-zero interest rate world that we live in now. And he talks about this a lot, where he says, you're never going to change a CEO's mind, right? Once a CEO at a company has made up their mind that they're going to have this pet project or they're going to acquire this company, and he gives numerous examples where he's on the boards of companies and he cannot, because what happens, he says, is first of all, that CEO has already hired all these people to do the charts, and they're all forecasting that this thing is going to be huge, and they all have the incentive. They're not going to make the CEO look foolish, and the charts are not going to go in any direction except up. And there's too many incentives at play for the people below the CEO just to not say no, to not embarrass them, right, whenever they're asking for something like that. And so I think it's basically, so his answer is, you got to get involved with CEOs you like and people that are going to try to do the right thing, because forget about it, you're not going to change them. And being underneath that is a whole other problem. If the people above them who are on the board of directors that are supposed to like police them can't change them, there's no chance that the guy underneath is going to change them. So if you're 5 levels below and you're going to take the brunt of it, and there's this brand new thing and it's bullshit, I mean, you've got to navigate the stuff that you know that's not bullshit. You got to make sure that stuff doesn't fall through no matter what, because that's your bread and butter. And so there have been projects where I have known for sure that, okay, this is a disaster, basically. This isn't going to work. But look, I'll play along. I'll show up to the meeting. I'll protect my team. We'll figure this out, right? Whatever yeah. Let's let somebody else mess this thing up. I'm not going to be the one to mess it up, but it's going to get messed up. It's pretty obvious. But I think if you're in that kind of situation, you need to just, now you've got this job of basically figuring out how the bread and butter doesn't go bad. while at the same time, how's that song go? Let me down gently or whatever. You just got to make sure that you don't burn all these bridges because you know the thing is not a good idea.
I'm going to riff on that for a second and say that it's different when it's a pet project versus something that is paying everybody's salaries. And you don't want to mess up. You want to keep the lights on, right? You don't want to ruin the thing that is paying for all these mortgages. It's different when it's like, I want to try out a new thing with crypto and AI and whatever as a side project to the main bread and butter, right? Now, I've actually been in this situation where I was the person that basically got spun out to build this brand new product. We had all of this back of the napkin math and spreadsheets that showed that the total addressable market it's massive. And if we only got 1% of the market, we'd make like $1 bazillion. I'll tell you how much of the market we actually got. We got 0% of that market. Okay. And this product basically sits on a very dusty shelf. It was a complete and horrible, abject failure. And I learned a lot of lessons from this, which is to say no early and often. Right? Say no early and often, talk to your users early and often, talk to your stakeholders early and often. And if someone says they'll pay for something, that's a lie until they actually put their credit card down. And this is like a very quick like software selling SaaS or build entrepreneurship in a nutshell sort of lesson, right? You can't build a business based on people saying hypothetically that they'll pay you when you spin out a product in 6 months. And what I ultimately left with after this whole failure was wonderful stories to tell at my interviews. When I interview and people say, tell me about a time that you worked on something that blah, blah, blah. I'm like, tell you what, I have a great story. I want to tell you all about it. Louis, you have your head up again.
Yeah, so Derek Sivers has this wonderful story that ties into this. And he said he had a friend who took out an ad in a magazine for a product that he made. And he took out an ad and he said, look, the magazine circulates to 100,000 people. If I even get 1% of that, I'm going to sell basically, I don't know, 1,000 copies or whatever. And he went and prepared 1,000 versions of his product or whatever it was. The ad went out. He was just waiting at the telephone for the orders, and no orders came in. And it's like he said, my friend forgot that there is a number lower than 1%. It's 0%. Like you could always just totally miss the mark, and it happens. And what's really messed up about these kinds of projects is that there are people that latch onto it, and override their own instincts, even of the thing being a failure, the thing being a bad idea, because they see it as a road to promotion. They see it as a road to I'm going to latch on. And so they're super excited about this thing that even they know that it's messed up, but all the people that above them are super excited. So they have to follow through with it. And it's a bad place to be. I would say buy time and let somebody else mess it up. So you don't get the blame for messing it up. The other thing is if you get put on that team, you're in a lot of trouble. But if your team is involved, don't be the one that messes it up. Just do whatever it takes. But I do think the nice thing about those projects that are destined to fail is they will eventually fail. And when they do, you still got your bread and butter. You still got the things that you were supposed to be looking after. You didn't drop those things because of this prompt grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah, I think you speak to the sunk cost fallacy, right? It is human emotion that once you've invested so much time, sweat, money into a project, it's very hard to let that go. At some point, your ego kicks in and says, but I really wish, or I really hope, or I really want this to work. And you keep going, or forcing the teams that you've picked to keep going, hoping that rainbows and unicorns will emerge once this is done. But it seldom happens. So good point out. And I'm glad that all of us have been through in some fashion through this. One topic that we haven't touched on, but maybe we should, is managing your manager. This is important to do because you need to be at the right wavelength with your manager. You need to have reasonable expectations that you both agreed on. And maybe how that differentiates between your career goals and your projects that you're working on. How do you manage expectations with your manager, both in terms of where you want to go in the company, how quickly you want to grow, what is a good goal for you personally, professionally? It could be a cushy job and doing your 9 to 5 because you just got married or you just had a baby or you want that. It could be, I want to get to the top as fast as possible because that's where the money is and that's what I need right now. But you don't always get the buy-in or blessing of your manager because they have somebody else in mind or they have other goals in mind. How do you navigate some of those complexities?
Yeah, if you don't have the blessing of your manager, it doesn't matter what you have your heart set to. I don't think you're going to get there. I'll just want to say that. And that might be contentious. Some people might think that despite your manager, you might still become successful. Let's pretend for a second that I'm correct. I think that you have to be explicit with your manager about what it is your goals are right from the very beginning. Your very first meeting, they're going to ask you something like, what do you want to do here? My manager did. Do you want to be a manager? I said, absolutely not. I want to be an IC. And the day that I change my mind, you'll be the first to know. And you want to have those regular check-ins, right? We had an episode on this podcast where we talked about having what is the perfect one-on-one with your manager. So refer back to that episode. You need to have those regular one-on-ones where you need to have check-ins with your manager on what your goals are. Is your goal to become a manager? Is your goal to become a higher level IC? Is your goal to, I want to run such and such committee and I want to have 17 STDs published this year and I want to win the respect of my peers? You want to make sure that you are getting, you're checking in with them as to whether you're meeting those goals. If they're measurable goals, like I want 17 talks, that's easy. But if you want goals like I want to get promoted into a senior something position, make sure every single time you meet with them, quick check-in. Like, let's talk about this for 5 minutes. Am I on the right track? Am I hitting all of these various things on this rubric for, I don't know, whatever your company's career ladder looks like, right? You want to make sure that you're hitting every one of those. So that's my whole thing. Communicate with your manager explicitly. Talk to them and just make sure you're on the right page. And you didn't bring this up, but I want to mention as well, right? You talked about when you said bread and butter, it made me think of the whole positive, negative, positive sandwich, right? And I do think you have to also manage up your manager. You want to make sure that you're giving them good feedback as well. I think you did a really good job of this meeting where you were super well informed about this topic that we were discussing. You were like really technical about this and not blah, blah, blah. Or you say, hey, you got a little too into the weeds here. And I would really appreciate it if you did not step in and do on-call rotation. It means that we're not able to adequately train our other engineers to do on-call rotation. You should definitely do that kind of managing up with your manager as well. And definitely ask them, what do they want to do? What are their aspirations? What are they working toward? And they might tell you that I just want to stay here, which is totally a normal thing for you to say as well, right? It's not just if your life situation changes. Maybe you just, for example, I'm a principal engineer. I know for a fact that senior principals at my company don't do as much coding as me or very little. And I don't want that. So I, this year, asked my manager, I don't want to be promoted. I don't think I'm on the track to promotion. But if I am for some reason, I don't want it. I want to stay exactly where I am because I'm really enjoying my role and I'm really growing into it. And I feel like I'm like really hitting my stride and I want to get great at it. Previously, I've asked not to be promoted. I was like, I want to be paid more. Okay. Here's what I want to be making next year. I want you to just pay me that and not promote me. That's what I want, because when you get promoted, everything changes for you. You're in a completely different role. I'm like, I'm doing great in this role. Everyone tells me I'm doing great. Don't ruin that for me. Just give me more money.
Yeah, I would say to try to find out what are the goals of your manager, what is like worrying this person, I think is by far, I would say, the most important thing I learned, and try to use her one-on-one to get a little bit of that, like some of the frustration, some of the other projects that are burning. But the one thing I would say is maybe since I was promoted to director, I have never had a career conversation as I have with my directs, or is mostly about some expectations and is mostly, okay, those are the big projects or those are the big things that we need to focus, the OKRs at the beginning of the year. And that's what I'm going to handle. Like basically that's then telling me, okay, that's your responsibility out of everything we're doing here. And the other thing that I have started doing maybe this year is more like, what is going to be my focus this week, right? Okay, every one-on-one, I'm gonna say, okay, next week I'm gonna be doing a deep dive on rebudgeting everything. Like that's gonna be the main thing I'm gonna do. And just not asking their blessing, but just informing this is gonna be my main thing next week. Or we have this big presentation. That's gonna be my main thing. Of course, I'm gonna keep one-on-ones, I'm gonna keep like things that are burning, not burning. But and I don't know if it's just me, but I noticed at some point in my career, I stopped having those career conversations. And the conversations I have with my managers these days are more like straight to the point, less personal, I would say. With the exception of like performance cycle and bonus, where we get to some feedback, but I don't have that level of detail that Vic was saying as a director.
Does
I
that
don't have
hurt?
that anymore.
Sorry to jump in. Does that hurt your chances of climbing the corporate ladder, though, assuming you're not getting feedback on an ongoing basis till performance cycle time? Maybe
Yeah,
you don't want
it
it.
might
Maybe
be.
it is in line with what you want or where you want to go. But if it's not, finding out at year end is a little too late, no?
Yeah, I would say at director plus level, if you're not getting feedback and you're still in the job, is usually a good sign, right? People are not gonna be doing like, and you're not gonna be receiving as much feedback. You're gonna receive really direct feedback when things are not working, right? This is a disaster. You have to handle this. It's gonna be really harsh and really direct to you. Especially if you get to executive level, I think is forget it, right? You're lucky if you get the 360 feedback done by external company, but you're not going to be given specific feedback about you. I think at least I have not seen that much.
I think when we all think about the best people we've ever managed, it's people we didn't have to actively manage. So you want to be that for your manager. Sometimes forced in that position if you have a manager who's really hands off and doing their own thing. And sometimes you have a very involved manager, but you'll find even for those people, they don't want to be involved. Honestly, they just want to know that you got your area, you're doing a good job, and you maybe even got a little bit of their workload. I feel like one really good way of doing that, I think Tiago talked about the weekly plan or sharing your goals for the day or for the week, proactively doing that, sharing any sort of updates, but more than just updating your manager, they want to know what's wrong and how are you dealing with it and where can they step in. I feel like a lot of us want to be like, everything's going great. I got a handle on it all. And here's just 3 things that I just fixed. Okay, so what are you doing now? What are you focusing on now? So you want to give very quick updates as they happen, I feel, and then go to any meetings with them with, here's the situation I'm dealing with, here's how I'm thinking about it, give me your opinion. Everyone loves to give an opinion and thoughts, and they don't love to do any of the actual work. Put your manager in that situation there and make it so that they get to be your coach on your team as opposed to your manager. And when it comes to getting feedback, again, I don't think you should go through your manager necessarily, because I don't think we should be asking people to give feedback through managers either. And most likely your manager isn't in every meeting with you or seeing all the work you're doing day to day. So they might not have the right data points. Something I actually just did, I'm a month back from maternity leave. I sent a feedback form to all of my peers and said, I'm back for a month, give me anonymous feedback. So I think you have to be in charge of your own destiny there. Tiago, go ahead.
100%. And I think one thing that at the director level, I think managers of directors usually love is like exactly what you said, Mitra, about tell them exactly the things that went wrong and what you did to fix the situation and like how you address it, right? Okay, last week there was so and so situation. I did X, Y, and Z, and that's now addressed, right? It's just like you're not only you're really reporting in the past. I think that's usually a really good thing. Tell stories about everything you did behind the scenes. Louis?
Yeah, okay. So I think the best way to have a good relationship with your manager is to be the sort of person that's deserving of a good manager. And what I mean by that is obviously your manager cares about you delivering and all of that. So get that out of the way. But besides that, right, how do you influence the people below you? By leading by example. And it's the same thing with your manager, right? Anyone that you touch directly because you're constantly in conversations with them and all of that. You want to always be, it's a partnership. So what would you do for your partner? Be a good partner, right? That's what it means to have, even if you happen to have a bad manager, you're going to force them to be good because you're a good partner, right? So you're going to be proactive about stuff, and it's going to put them in an awkward spot if they're falling behind. They're going to know that they're being a shitty partner. And I think that's really the best way to, and I'm not sure if I'm making perfect sense, but there's a lot of situations where just behave the way you want them to behave and be as transparent as you want them to be transparent. And all of that sort of stuff applies to this. And I really think it could go a very long way. I think you can heavily influence your manager by being a really good partner.
Thank you, Louis. I think we had some amazing tidbits. We shared a lot of advice, a lot of tips, managing up, down, sideways, and specific instances. So this was great. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. And we will see you all next week. Thank you.